Welcome to the Charged Up, or welcome back to the Charged Up podcast. I'm Simon Wray.
And I'm Justin Canning.
Welcome back, Justin.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be back.
It's good to see you. So today I thought we could have a chat about solar in the UK and whether it's worth it.
Yes.
I see a lot of comments online about this. It seems to be a hot topic. Not everybody is a solar nerd and has really dug into it. So maybe we could help our viewers understand and listeners understand whether solar in the UK makes economical sense.
Or it's a load of baloney.
Or is it? Is it just, what is it and what isn't it?
Well, it's employed me for the past 17 years as an industry and hundreds of thousands of others. So it's certainly here to stay.
Let's dig into it then.
Yeah.
So at a high level, tell me about the UK and solar irradiance without going into too much detail.
Yeah, I think that was the main issue, wasn't it? Back sort of 15 years ago when solar panels started appearing and the feed-in tariff, got the market going. It was like, well, hang on, this is the UK. It's not very sunny here. Are you mad?
We have a lot of cloudy days.
Yeah, does it work? People were that was really the question that was on people's minds at that point. Like, why do solar in the UK? I mean, there's a big discrepancy between summer generation and winter generation. That's obviously the main sort of issue to manage in this country. But the paybacks speak for themselves. So the does it work question doesn't get asked anymore. Not least because we have solar panels everywhere. You can see them. Some people would argue there's too many of them, but on new builds you certainly see them. On the new build estates, in fields. Obviously, there's opposition to them. At the sort of megawatt scale in certain parts of the country, but the does it work question is asked less now because they are more prevalent. They're more accepted.
The economics work, basically.
Exactly. The economics have proven themselves over time. The equipment, works and warranties have extended. We can talk about that a bit later. But
I recall a long time ago when solar first came onto the market.
Yeah.
And the feed-in tariff was introduced in order to kind of accelerate that market and get the early adopters on board. And it needed a subsidy because it wasn't economically viable. I think payback periods were, without the subsidy, would have been
20 years.
Yeah. And it was just not viable.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that generation of people would take that information with them and pass that down to their friends and family.
There was a moment between the feed-in tariff ending and then before electricity prices came up again. There was the conversation a lot then when you talked about solar. It was like, oh, I thought that had ended. I didn't think people did solar anymore because there was no more subsidy.
Right.
So people of the assumption that without a subsidy, there's no point.
The economics didn't work.
And actually, for about 2 years, they were almost right in that respect because, the industry was on its knees. Price of installation was still up at this point and the cost of electricity was still down at this point. And then since...
What year would that have been then?
That would have been sort of 2018... Between 2016 and 2018.
So about 8 to 10 years ago.
Exactly, yeah. It's a fair while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then as electricity prices came up for various reasons, and cost of install came down again, and then batteries came into the market to make solar more usable and offer more revenue streams, etc. Again, another topic that we can dig into in more detail. But at that point, it was clear that electricity costs were creating a payback that was, in line with what the subsidy payback would have been.
Right.
Yeah. So suddenly it was like a replacement of a driver in the market. Electricity costs were now the prime driver of the solar market.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because I know that electricity prices aren't just for the generation of electricity. When the bill is generated, it's got the margins for the supplier, it's got any subsidies. So anybody who's not taking advantage of a subsidy is effectively subsidising somebody who is.
Yes.
So the breakdown of that bill, maybe we'll have a chat about that another time. Of you know, where does our money go when we spend?
We definitely need graphics to explain the electricity wholesale market. But
it can be Googled. The information is there.
Yeah, it's all out there. Yeah. But there's a lot of chat about it at the government level, isn't it? Like, do we decouple electricity costs from the wholesale gas prices?
So I tell you what we'll do, because it'll be interesting, because if electricity prices come down, then the economics again are going to be back in the review potentially. But I think what's massively changed is just the cost of hardware.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. Even since my own install 2-3 years ago.
Yeah,
you know, panel sizes or panel capacities are up 20-30%, and prices are down 70 or 80%.
Yeah,
I think it makes I talk about it with my friends about it being a no-brainer. The economics are an absolute no-brainer now.
Yeah.
Generation-wise, it's quite funny to see. Sometimes in March, we generate more than we do in the summer.
Yeah.
And because of the temperature of panels, can have an impact, and performance degrades, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you've got obviously quite a few variables to consider at the same time, and certainly one of the questions we used to get asked a lot was, how quickly do these panels degrade? And they have warranties to protect against that degradation, but actually the variation year on year is less to do with equipment degrading, but more to do with the fluctuations in the amount of sun. And obviously since 2020, it seems we've just had one, increase in irradiance levels, year on year. It feels like, obviously there's other background reasons for that, but we are having more irradiance, it feels like, in the last 5 years or so than we were, 10, 15 years ago. So that's kind of, taking that degradation argument away, not least because, warranties are also being extended by the panel manufacturers. The more they're out there in the market, the more evidence they've got, the more confidence they've got in their own product. And there's no moving parts in a solar panel. So as long as their component sourcing and their quality of manufacturing is under control, and they have that visibility, and they test all these panels before they go out the factory, etc. But as long as they've got that confidence, they can extend these warranties. And so that becomes a marketing opportunity, competition between the different brands. Now you've got 30-year performance warranties, whereas before they were 25. Some manufacturers are even going to 40 years.
That's right.
Yeah. So
they can stand behind their brand.
Yeah.
And their product.
Yeah.
They've been in the market a long time, so they know that this isn't just marketing. Waffle.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're being, sorry to interrupt, but they're being tested in much more aggressive climates than ours.
Yeah.
Middle of Australia, for instance, they have a big test facility there. China, they'll also have them, but in much more aggressive, challenging environments. Obviously, solar panels' preferred sort of environment is, very low temperature but very high amounts of sun. So Alps, top of the Alps would be a great place for a solar panel. You get really good production.
Absolutely. So isn't it something like 21 degrees is where it's tested as it's optimal? And now we're not talking massive drop-offs here.
No.
But it's fractions of a percent for every few degrees that you go
Coefficient of performance.
There we go.
Yeah.
So
0.03 or something percent above a certain degree per percent, the performance drops off. So you will notice it. You will notice,
and that's what I say,
drop down. Yeah.
You can technically peak. You can get higher peak generation on a sunny spring day.
Yes.
When the air is cool.
Yeah.
And the radiance is high.
Yeah.
But without going into too much technical detail about that.
Yeah.
Generally, the economics of solar, if we talk about that, so you don't need sun, is one of the. You need irradiance.
Yes.
So they do work in cloudy climes.
Yeah.
It's all about irradiance, and there's lots. And there's a European database, the PVGIS.
PVGIS.
Yeah. And that's got years and years and years of history.
Yeah.
So this is when you see online calculators and things like that. When you put your postcode in and your orientation, it reads that database and says, historically, that is how much generation has been
Yes.
generated, and you can tell very quickly whether the economics are going to work for you.
Yeah.
What's interesting, what I learned was that north-facing panels generate about 40% of a south-facing panel.
That's it.
So they're not a complete waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's better to have them whilst they're cheap than it is to...
Well, certainly, if you've already got an installation going up and you've got available roof space, it doesn't cost that much extra to put more panels up.
Yeah.
Does it? If you're going to do it anyway while you're up there.
The labour cost of adding another elevation is only a fraction once you're already mobilised on site.
Yeah.
East-west as well is surprisingly efficient for the UK.
Yeah, so I mean that for me that's really interesting, that dynamic, because feed-in tariff era promoted south-facing roofs at 30 degrees to maximise the kilowatt-hour output from a day's generation, because that's what you get paid for. You get paid for the generation. But actually, because the profile has changed now, you want consumption. It's all about consumption. The more of your own solar-generated energy you consume, the better your return on investment. So east-west is now a better profile to
morning
have.
And evening.
Exactly, morning and evening. That's when you're using it. You're not using it in the middle of the day. So we've got lots of customers who've got these east-west profiles with a heat pump, and they're consuming 90% of the energy that they generate, which is fantastic. Yeah.
And obviously the holy grail would be all 4 elevations.
But
I think the general rule would be as many panels as you can get on. They are so cheap.
Yes. Yeah.
It just makes total sense.
Yeah, there's always something you can do with the solar energy, isn't there? That you can either export it and sell it to the grid.
Yeah.
You can store it in your battery, depending on how many batteries you have, or it's going to be consumed by your hot water.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So let's talk about electricity cost versus your self-generated cost. Do you have any?
Yeah. So obviously, the technical term for that is LCOE, levelized cost of electricity. So the idea is that you take a 20-year period and you look at the cost of installing that system, the cost of maintaining that system, solar system, and then the amount of kilowatt hours that you're going to produce in that period. And if you divide those up, you get a cost per kilowatt hour. So the bigger the system, the lower that kilowatt hour cost is going to be. And for a typical commercial system, say 500 kilowatts, cost of electricity that you produce is going to be about 5 pence per kilowatt hour. Obviously, retail costs are over 20 pence even for commercial consumers, not industrial. Industrial costs will be lower than that, but commercial. Levelized cost of electricity gives us an idea of where we are in terms of the economics for your system, how much it's going to cost you. For a house, it's probably going to be closer to 8 to 10 pence. Roughly, depending on lots of variables that within that sort of those assumptions. But the idea being that you can assess what your costs are in terms of, what will you get for the export payment? What will you get in terms of the payback? What will you? So if you can start to get an idea on what your costs of electricity are, it can help you, get comfortable with.
Because that's interesting. We don't really see LCOE mentioned in certainly at a domestic level, and we talk about it commercially, but it's always about return on investment and payback periods. I think it's easier to understand that sometimes. Is if you spend 20k on a system, how long is it going to take you to generate 20k's worth of value
of savings?
But there's lots of variables. How much are you going to export? How much are you going to get paid to export? So that model is an estimate.
It is, absolutely.
Because it all depends on whether you're self-consuming.
And you have to be
or
upfront about that, because you can put battery modelling into that as well, and off-peak tariffs, are an essential part of battery modelling to help with the payback and cost reduction. But they can change. Every year they can change. They're not written in stone for the next 20 years. So you've got to be careful about how far out you put those projections in terms of certain aspects. But, a lot of the time we use a cost of inflation in the cost of electricity, don't we? Like a rise every year. And we use between 5 and 7% per annum as an assumption,
or even less if you're feeling conservative or, But you don't need electricity prices to go up in order to, systems now make a lot of economic sense. It's the difference between it taking 3 years
Absolutely.
to pay back and 3 years and 8 months.
Yeah.
It's not 8 years or 12 years.
Yeah.
Or even if you've got big batteries, it's still 5 or 6 years potentially.
Yeah.
So when you look at all the other benefits, so speak, talking about the value of that.
Yeah.
We're talking, let's just say 28 pence is the average cost of electricity at peak time.
Yeah.
So if your solar is generating free energy, it's worth 28 pence per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
As long as you can consume it.
Yes. Yeah.
But as you rightly say, the bell curve is inverted. Is generations at the peak time of the day. What do you do with it if you're not gonna consume it?
Yeah.
So I think the economics are really important. That it's not just a blanket. Here's your postcode.
That's it.
Off you go. It's understanding what's your what is your consumption index look like?
Yeah.
And how much of that 28 pence generation can we consume on site? How much can we put in a battery to save it for later?
Yeah.
When generation moves down.
Yeah.
And what's the value at the moment? It's all the calculations and the modelling that was done recently was all on 15 pence with Octopus. It's now 12 pence.
That's it. Yeah.
And obviously then you've got variable rates being paid by different people. What is interesting, actually, I hadn't really thought of this before, but we could talk about virtual power plants and the Axel Energies of this world and things like that, and grid services.
Yeah.
So this is where my understanding is you participate in an event where you are going to be. Well, you explain it to me.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely an episode on its own in terms of getting into the detail. But if we just
think new, does it work?
Exactly. It's not been around for very long, is it?
Is it just a sales?
P415 regulation's been around for about 2 years max.
That's it, yeah.
And they work at the commercial scale as well as the residential. They only work at residential scale if if the inverter manufacturer has an API or whatever, or a relationship with the provider of these services, Axel being one.
They basically take control of your inverter
during that period.
For that period.
Yeah, and they'll let you know, they'll give you like 24 hours notice.
Yeah.
A lot of people will already be familiar with Octopus saving sessions.
Yeah.
It's the same, it's exactly the same concept. They give you 24 hours notice. You reduce your demand during that period, Octopus will pay you. Yeah, but with Axel, who are a battery aggregator, they'll give you that 24 hours notice, and then they take control of your battery.
Yeah.
So they're either taking energy from the grid or putting energy back into the grid to help the grid manage its own voltage frequency.
So we could summarize that without going into too much technical detail, but that is another revenue stream that you could now start to use in the economics of whether a solar system.
But the important thing there is it's icing on the cake.
Yeah.
It's not going to be something that's
not a business case.
It's not. It's definitely not a business case. No.
But it's an opportunity saving or value.
And particularly at the commercial scale, it's quite hard to persuade the FDs of this world that you've got something compelling there that they should really notice, because it's a bit, in their eyes, it's a little bit flimsy, and unless they've got
it's
much
new and
more
unknown, and certainly at a commercial level, there's work to be done in educating FDs
and it's a market that's
others
quite young, so we have to be.
That's why it's quite exciting. It's certainly exciting for me, and
I think the principle's fantastic, isn't it? Because it means you don't have gas-powered fire stations running in the background. They have to be fired up, burning energy that doesn't get exported to the grid before they're even going to be utilized to manage the frequency. So if you're not wasting all of that energy, and you can do it with batteries, which is coming from solar primarily, the argument again for going back to the wholesale price of electricity, for decoupling gas wholesale prices from electricity is so strong. I'll just finish at this point. On a day where it's windy and there's sunshine, you could have 60-70% renewable energy going into the grid. Obviously that's hard to model for the forecasters going forward because you've got unpredictability. But you put batteries into that equation at scale, and suddenly you're taking a huge amount of control of your energy at very significant percentage levels.
I love batteries, and I'm going to talk more about batteries. I think every home should have a battery. It's the ultimate buffer.
Yeah.
So let's get back to, is solar worth it in the UK? And let's recap on what my understanding from what you've just said there. So the economics are now, my words, a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You're not.
I use that term well.
Do you? It's no longer a really long payback period.
No.
You've just got to maximise the amount of generation
that you
on your roof and that you can consume.
Yeah.
What has changed? What questions are you asked now versus what were you asked previously? Just
it's moved on.
Summary.
It's definitely moved on because it's not about the technology now. It's more about you as an installer. You know, where have you been the last 10 years? Where are you going to be around for the next 10 years? Particularly at the commercial level, you know, people want to work with someone.
Longevity.
They want
security,
longevity.
and
they know the technology is going to work. They want someone to take control of their system, to maintain it, take responsibility for all those attractive payback numbers they put together.
Do you think they're asking those questions because they had some fingers burned?
Without doubt. Unfortunately, without doubt. You know, everyone has come across this scenario where an installer is not there anymore. We come across it a lot.
Well, there's a lot of systems that we look at.
Unfortunately,
that are no longer in maintenance or the
people recognise it's a long-term investment. People recognise the value and the payback, etc. But so now it's much more about the credible installation partner that they're going to choose.
And are there anything else? Any other questions that what's changed? So we've
got
notebook. Hardware, that's less of an issue now. Maybe inverters, still get questions about inverter length or
inverter warranties. Yeah, I mean domestic warranties are 10 years, commercial are 5 years. So there's some questions around the variations there. But 10-year warranty on inverter, I think that's pretty compelling to residential.
And we see systems that have been, we've got customers who've got inverters that are 14 plus years old and they're still working.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah.
The technology's moved on now. So even if your system's working, I'd be interested to run the numbers and see what's the economic benefit of taking out an old fit system or old equipment, older panels and older inverters to see, how does the break-even curve work on that?
It's always worth looking at. Yeah.
No, it's good. I think that's quite interesting. If people are asking, will it last?
Yeah.
You can use warranties as a helpful benchmark.
Yeah.
Will your installer still be around in 10 or 15 years?
Yeah.
That's another good question.
Yeah.
So
it's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, we've been around a long time.
Yeah.
And we intend to be around for a long time yet. But it'll be interesting to see how the market kind of settles down. There's a lot of new players coming into the space, and their only differentiator is cost.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you go in at the lowest possible cost, sounds great, but when you need to call them up at midnight on a Sunday,
and then who do you call up?
Who's going to come out?
Exactly.
If they need to.
Yeah.
So I think that's really useful. It's been helpful for me as well. So thanks very much, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been interesting. Good chat.
I look forward to having you on again.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
All the best. If you've got any questions or comments, put them in the section below and we'll answer them in the next podcast.